apologize hugely, and we're going to redo this.
So do you think people heard the opening or nothing at all?
No, probably not.
Okay.
Probably not. And I want to welcome everyone through the live stream. I apologize for starting it a few minutes late. And I am seeing some comments coming in. So Rick is on YouTube. Juliet is on YouTube as well. And I'm super happy and excited to have you all here. And, what I want to do is introduce this live stream a little bit and introduce my beautiful wife and partner, Robin, who's going to be helping me do this today. Robin, over to you for a second.
Thank you, Jürgen. Well, I'm very happy to be here. And again, apologies for that little hiccup. So I'm happy to be able to work with Jürgen on this. But I have another positive emotion I want to share, and that is the emotion of gratitude. Because we're very grateful that you have chosen to invest some time with us today, particularly with the backdrop that's going on with COVID-19 circling us. It is a challenging time. And so we talk about social distancing, and I just want to put a thought to you. Perhaps it's not so much social distancing that we need at the moment, because socially we need to be connected. Maybe the right term could be physical distancing. And so what we're sharing to offer you today hopefully will strengthen your capacity to build your resilience as people and as businesses to be able to deal with these very challenging and disturbing times. So with that backdrop then, we see that a number of people have taken up our invitation to share with us their valuable content and what is meaningful and purposeful for them. And Jürgen will demonstrate and coach you through some of the issues that you're interested in learning more about. And so having said that, even if you didn't submit or respond to our invitation, but you're lurking out there, do say hello, because
we're good lurkers.
we sympathize with lurkers. Often the lurkers are introverted and they have lots to contribute. So please say that you're here, and it's always fun to know where you're from. And I'll just hand back to Jürgen. And again, gratitude that you're here with us today.
Well, thank you, Robbie. I think, this is fantastic. I'm seeing a few folks on the chat space that I recognize. A huge welcome to you guys. If you haven't let us know that you've joined, just type in your name, where you're joining us from. We're super excited to have you here. I'm wanted to give couple of shout outs to folks that are joining us. We've received a bunch of submissions from people's podcasts of SEO questions and episode title questions that folks have submitted. We try to get through as many as we can. I'm seeing this live stream run for at least an hour, but we're trying to, we'll be here as long as it takes, or, within reason. I think we're probably not going to go run over 2 hours, but we'll try to get to people's questions. And, there have been some really interesting podcasts that have come through, not in the least from some podcasts that are supporting the nurses community, or that are supporting women's empowerment and the COVID, during the COVID crises. As Robin is saying, I think that these digital presence skill sets are so important these days more than ever. And I think that has sort of an upsurge in, people wanting to be present and wanting to be found and get their messaging out there. And so I want to talk a little bit in level set on how this is going to work. So basically, you guys would have already known that if you went to polymash.com/live, if you're watching this on YouTube and not elsewhere, you can go there and submit your podcast and your episode ideas or questions for consideration. And we have quite a few to work through already. And what we're going to do is this content is based on a presentation that I was fortunate to be able to give at PodFest, the last sort of major conference that we went to before the COVID situation really escalated. And on polymash.com/live, the content that we presented that was really well received, we had a packed house at PodFest. That content it exists in the form of a mini course that you can sign up for free. It's a great background on things like how SEO, domain authority, and SEO research can benefit your podcast. And it's the perfect background to be able to follow along. It's not a prerequisite. We'll cover some of this today, but I just wanted to make people aware of that there is a free course that goes along with this content really, really well. So with that, Robbie, do you think that we want to maybe give some shout outs to folks that have joined us on the chat?
Well, absolutely, Jürgen. I see that Rick and Sourdough Power, whom we know as Scott also, have already connected, and I think they're geographically close by. So that's wonderful. So so perhaps you'd like to say hi to those people, and then there's also Jeff, Joseph, and Juliet Roy. So we have a number of people here. So that's very exciting.
Yeah, it's great. I'm happy to see people interacting on the chat. I do want to give a shout out to our friend Scott, who's joining us all the way from LA. And, he's got an amazing podcast called Not Real Art.
And you might want to take the camera back, Jürgen.
I did. I was showing the chat at the moment.
Oh, right.
So people can sort of see
yep.
some of the comments that are coming in. But I wanted to give a shout out to Scott and the Not Real Art podcast, which is promoting urban street women artists, in the most amazing way. And, he has, some amazing street artists that are getting interviewed. And I think that in these times, for us for me as a former artist and photographer, the perspective that artists lend to our current times more so than ever, it's so important. The commentary that we get, the points of view that they contribute. And Scott interviews many people in both the visual arts, muralists, street artists, urban artists, emerging women artists, in filmmakers, on his show. And, that's an amazing podcast and site to go check out. If you're interested, you can download a wonderful book that he's just published called Top 100, the 100 Top Street Artists in the United States. So just check out notrealart.com. Wanted to give a small shout out here to Scott, and welcome. We're psyched that you're on the chat and on the podcast.
And that's Sourdough Power.
Sourdough.
He's
yes.
Also known as Scott, right? And we also have Ivo. He's joined us too.
Ivo, welcome. Ivo is the host of podcast Pontifications, I don't want to say professional contrarian, but an amazingly insightful and cool point of view. So if you haven't checked that out, that's definitely a show that you must subscribe for any podcaster. Ivo, welcome. And also we have Juliet. She sent us a submission for a site called Be Your Change. And I think that's going to be the first one where we're going to dive into a little detail. Juliet, you were one of the first ones to send us your details. And I'm really inspired by your site and your podcast. And, we'll see whether we can help you. I dug a little bit into some SEO research and keywords, and hopefully you'll find some value, out of, what we'll have to share with you. Cool. So who else? Rick, welcome. Robin, you'll keep an eye on the chat.
Yes.
And maybe what I'll do is I'll jump into just providing a little background. So for some of you that saw us at Podfest, I apologize if this is a duplicate, but it's only going to take a couple of minutes, and I do think it's going to level set what we're here to accomplish. And, so from that perspective, let me jump into, some content that, that will sort of illustrate what we're talking about. So I'm hoping you guys can see this. So our really, we have 3 goals today. It says 2. That's wrong. I got to change that. But it's challenging the assumptions, around what role SEO and our website can play in the growth for your podcast or blog for that matter. But it's also, we want to do a live demo of the method that we use to help flip the script. And I'll explain a little bit about what that is. Robbie, what does that mean to you? Flip the script. What does flip the script mean when you think of it?
Well, maybe we should ask Evo about that because
Yeah, or
it's
Scott, it's like an elevator. Right?
oh,
What does it have to do with
yeah,
a script?
yeah. So yes, it's. I mean, I might say it's reframing. I mean, it's seeing it from a different perspective. And you also have another name, Jürgen, which is, you know, what is it? Thinking at a higher level or
Next level
next
thinking.
level
So
thinking.
I
So
don't know
it's
whether it's
really
that, but
about how you might challenge and change and use things that will serve you and others.
well, it's like me as a German, with English not my first language, you sort of wind up adopting all these idioms, and I never feel like I really, really understand where they came from. Flipping the script, okay, piece of paper, so upside down, maybe looking at the backside of it. Anyway, that is, one of the purposes here, and you're going to understand what I mean, even if okay, you can make fun of me for that. But so then the third thing that I want to do is a little bit of live SEO help for the podcasters that are here with us first and foremost, and maybe some of the submissions that we've received. There might be too many to cover, but I'm hoping to get to that. So, but the level setting part of this, so just indulge me for a couple of minutes here to go through this content, because it's what results are possible. Why SEO? And what we're talking about here here's a perfect example of a show that launched about a year ago with no website. And for the SEO geeks out there, you know that when you first launch a website, the domain authority, the likelihood that Google will rank your pages on page 1, which is reflected by that stat, it's an industry metric that a company called Moz has standardized. But the domain authority reflects how likely you're going to be found. So here's a podcast with a brand new website, exactly a year old, and he's had, his Ken page, Deeper Dating, is awesome. And he's had about 190,000 downloads. And so I like to ask my podcasting friends this: how many people out of those 190,000, what percent of those listeners do you think went and visited his website? 5%, 25%? Tap into the chat. What do you think is a likely percentage? And don't cheat. The people who saw the talk don't you know the answer to this.
Perhaps it's not cheating. Perhaps it's just using the wisdom they gained. Again, flipping the script, right?
Exactly. Flipping the script. Well, so without further ado, I'm going to jump in here and start revealing the result. Well, it wasn't 5%, because that's the answer that I got most often. We're at
Rick says 5.
We're fortunate.
Jeff 5.
5, yeah, yep. 5. That's what I would have guessed too, and that's we're fortunate to be in Orlando, or near in Bradenton, Florida, but near Orlando, where some of the biggest podcasting communities in the Southeast are. And Chris Kremitzos, the founder of Podfest, actually has put on a podcast meetup here. That's the most populated and frequently attended podcast meetup in the United States. And I ask people this question all the time. So, how many people do you think? So it wasn't 5.
And Juliet says 10, and
it wasn't 10.
5.
It wasn't 25.
Sourdough 25.
Not 50. Not 75. How about 138%? Okay, I hear you. You skeptics going, what the hell? That's, well, here's what I mean is he's had 260,000 visits to his website because of the SEO work that he put into his show notes, so that we put into his show notes. To be fair, he's a client, right? So we've helped him do this, but this is something that you can learn how to do as well. And the point here is that your show notes are the driver of website traffic, and flipping the script now means that we've turned this upside down. People are discovering Ken's podcast and subscribing to it because they'd stumble on it on the web. And, I go into all the benefits of that, but the web and Google search is the primary way in which people search for podcasts. And there is an ROI to this. So the folks that are joining us that are business-minded, he now ranks for 177 keywords, right? That's what I mean here. And ranking for those 177 keywords is worth $2,000 a month. What I mean by that is you would have to pay Google AdWords $2,000 to rank for the keywords that Ken is getting for free because of his podcast. Does that make sense? Um, and that's, he's getting 2,000 clicks from organic search, right? And those 2,000 clicks wind up on his podcast show notes, and they then look, and of course, that's when you have a chance to get people to sign up, because the benefits of all of this far outstrip just, having listeners. I think that, that's another thing that I want to focus people on, is the benefits are, this is, by the way, his email list growth, right? So the benefits is not just the $2,000 free traffic, it's the list growth. He sold out all of his workshops, all of his group coaching intensives, and he stopped advertising on Facebook. And he stopped holding webinars, which were a big time suck for him, right? So, he's just filling his business to capacity from his podcast, just based on the fact that, he did what we're showing you how to do today. So even for my own podcast, which I've badly pod faded, but I'm doing this for the moment. But I had 10 episodes last year, and I stopped. So I haven't podcasted in about a year, but I'm coming good with these live streams, I'm hoping, and I'm ranking for 230 keywords, mostly based on podcast episodes, and that's worth $3,000 worth of free traffic. So what marketing method do you know for your podcast that could get you $3,000 worth of traffic and signups and subscribers that are no longer anonymous subscribers, right? So that's the kind of thing that we're talking about here. And Robbie, anybody having questions or anything in the chat come in about that?
Well, yes, I was just responding to Noise Media Network, and I have to find out who that is, asking if this is being recorded, as he's missed part of it.
Yeah, the lives are, will be available on YouTube, on our Facebook group. That's another thing that I should have mentioned, is we have a Facebook group.
I'll stop writing an answer then.
No, go ahead, Doc, just for completeness. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, you will be able to, after the live, you will be able to still see that on YouTube, Facebook pages. We're also live streaming into our Facebook group. So we're live on Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, and our Facebook group. All right. So if that makes sense, that sort of, I'm hoping, illustrated some of the thinking behind wanting to build up SEO as a way of driving traffic to your show. And maybe what I should do now is just jump right in and take on. I'm going to screen share with you guys some of the submissions that we've received. And, we're working this. So when you guys submit, it's capturing your submissions on a Trello board. And I'm going to start opening some of these submissions. And here's the first one that we received. Are you guys okay with that? Starting to go into the actual work? I'm assuming you are. So we had this awesome submission from Juliette Bucarel. Her podcast is called Be Your Change. And she sent us some questions and episode ideas and is asking for help with episode title SEO. So the stuff that I showed a little earlier, right, sort of, it's the idea is that if you do SEO and keyword research for the episode titles and then optimize the entire episode article, then you can have some good results on SEO, especially if you use a transcript. And that's something that we do. And some of the submissions, I'm not sure whether Liston Witherill has joined us on the chat. Robbie, have you seen him? Because that's another interesting submission that we received. He's doing a really great job with SEO already, and I might refer to some of that when we talk about some examples of opportunities of where you can take a transcript that he right now just pastes on the bottom of his show notes. And if you take that transcript and you turn it into SEO optimized show notes with headings and subheadings, and you disguise the fact that it's a transcript, the Google algorithms today are clever enough to where that makes a real difference, having a lot of images, alt tags, and some of the other things. So don't just paste the transcript to the bottom of your show notes. What we're going to show you in the StoryChief portion of this live stream is how to massage your transcript to become a highly SEO optimized vehicle for website growth for you. So with that, I'm switching back and looking at Juliet's submission here. I might make this a little better so that everybody can see it, a little bigger so that everybody can see it. So Juliet's podcast amplifies voices of women change makers who are bringing solutions to pressing issues. So I love that. And, she's also sent me a link to her podcast, and I'm going to open that right now. And here we go. Okay, cool. So, here is her website, and it lists the latest episodes. And there are also some episode articles. As I explained, those are, when you're actually looking at the, when you're looking at the individual episodes, the article that goes along with it is what gets indexed by Google and what is most important. So when we start thinking of SEO, the very first thing that we look at is to see what the domain authority is for the website. And when I look at that, and I have this little tool here from Mangools, this is KW Finder. It's a little Chrome extension. You can get it for free, but you can also sign up for this SEO suite. It's something that we're going to use repeatedly today. And if you're interested in the tools, by the way, I would hugely appreciate if you use our affiliate links. We earn a small shout out and commission from them at no extra cost to you. On polymash.com/live on the bottom, there are a couple of affiliate links that I'd have, and if you're interested and find value in this, that I'd encourage you to utilize. So all right, what this means, this domain authority score of 15 isn't bad. So that means that is not a brand new site. Now Google's domain authority is 100 by comparison. Major sites like CNN news sites and things will be in the 60s, like usually nonprofits and large organizations, .orgs, are in the 60s, and they have a really easy time getting things onto page one. This score or that rank determines how likely it is for you to be on page one. And when you first start a site, you might be lower than this. 15 is good. You're going to start to be able to rank on stuff on page one, typically around 20, 25, 30. So just hang in there. And actually, you might already rank pretty well for some keywords. And actually, I'm going to jump in and see, well, let's take a look at the site and see how well it's doing already. Because often one of the best strategies for SEO is to just build on what's already there. I'm using a tool called SpyFu for this. And I'm going to go in and, basically we're going to look up on SpyFu, just really quick, some statistics on beyourchange.co. All right. Well, so the site is relatively new, and, the site is ranking for the term tech inclusion. So there are not that many keywords that are ranking yet. So that's good to know. We can build on that. And what Juliet asked for help with was specifically some episode ideas or ideas for key phrases that she could rank for these episodes. Fair trade, women social entrepreneur ecosystem, refugees, human trafficking. These are the topics that she has. And I know that women social entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs itself is a huge topic. So let's dive in and do a little bit of, I'm going to jump into our KW Finder tool. And you will hopefully will start making sense as to how we go about tackling something like this. And then Juliet, what I will do, so let me look for women social entrepreneurs, and I'm going to explain what we're looking at here in a minute. So this might actually be a good key phrase for you. Women social entrepreneurs, and let me see whether I can zoom into this so that it becomes easier for people to see. I'm hoping that you can see this a little bit more easily. So women social entrepreneurs, I'm going to see whether I can zoom in even more than this. Okay, just bear with me for a second. Okay, so that key phrase, I am looking at some columns on KW Finder, And the columns indicate how many people are actually searching for this keyword a month. So, Juliet, if you did an article about, for example, 10 ways women social entrepreneurs rule or something like that, I will get to some ideas for article titles in a minute. But the key phrase that you would build into both your title and into your show notes, women social entrepreneurs, 110 people search for that a month. The reason that it's important, and there is a keyword difficulty score, and you're looking for anything that's green in a tool like this. 21 is still good. That's easy to rank. And what we're seeing on this side of the screen are either ideas that you might consider, and I'll go into that in a minute. What we're seeing on the, let me just zoom back out from here. What we're seeing on the other side of the screen is the trends and the difficulty of how easy or how hard it might be to rank for this. So 21 is good. You're looking for that. And then below that, it actually very helpfully shows us who's in position 1 of the search results, 2, 3, and 4. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit again so that we can see the the top 10 search results. So this is basically your competition. And what's important about that is that it shows the domain authority of the people that have made it to page 1. So you can learn a lot from that. Blog at Impactpreneurs, for example, they got on page 1 with only a domain authority of 21. That's a low domain authority. You're almost there, with Be Your Change. Your, what was it, the number? I forget now.
21?
15, I think it was 15. And so it won't be too long before you will be able to rank. So why did this person with a domain authority of 21, how did they get here? Let me take a look at this article. And right away, I can see that it's a long article. There's a lot of content here. There are images, there are headings, there are bullet points. So, this is an authority piece of content. And that's the concept behind what we're trying to do in a way, is that we're trying to take a transcript or your show notes and convert them, pretend like they're authority type articles.
Yeah, you can just slow down a little bit because with the lag, you're a little bit slower in showing this particular blog, but we're there now.
Okay, yeah, you might be seeing it with a delay, Robbie, if you're watching it on your phone. Hopefully the people that are watching it, there's an 8-second delay or so. Hopefully people watching it won't experience that.
That's awesome.
So I'm going to mark this one and add it to, so what I started to do, Juliet, I started to create a list of potential topics and keywords that might work for you, where you would have a chance to maybe rank in the top 10. And so I'm going to pull up this list for the Be Your Change podcast, and you see that I looked at other ones here. Here's one called Social Enterprise Examples. It's got 4,800 people actually searching for it, and it's still a relatively low difficulty keyword. This is the tricky part of doing this SEO research, you have to gauge. If you have a site that has a domain authority of 60, you would almost be guaranteed to rank for a keyword that you go after that has a keyword difficulty this low. If you've got a relatively new site, it's, the key phrases that people are searching for a lot, the popular ones, right? Like this one, it's 4,800 searches. They might be more difficult to rank for at first. They might be more difficult to break into the top 10 because so many people, they're more competitive. Also, a good indicator is this cost per click. So if somebody's advertising, people are paying $2.37 for this key phrase, social enterprise examples. But I still feel this would be a good one. So if you have a low domain authority, it's better to be on page 1, like with the women social entrepreneurs example. It's better to be on page 1 for a keyword that 100 people search for than to be on page 15 for a competitive keyword, but people never make it to page 15 of Google. It won't drive any traffic to you. That's what that's the point that I'm trying to drive home with, going for key phrases that don't look as good at first glance. But, if you're looking at 4,800, it's still, hopefully you'll be able to rank for that. So I'm hoping that this is useful, Juliet. let us know if you think that you could, use any of these topics and which ones. And what I'm going to do is, maybe while Robbie communicates with you guys in the chat, I'm going to copy these over into a spreadsheet for you. And I'm going to email you this sheet after our conversation today. So what I'm going to do is export these and, let Robbie sort of manage the chat for the moment.
Okay, so not much is happening here. Everyone is fully engaged with what you're saying, Jürgen. So I guess they're looking at the screen, and there's no delay. So that was my little faux pas showing my inexperience here. But Sourdough Power said no delay, looking good.
No delay. That's good to hear. So let me go.
So I'm curious to know from Juliet, how was she? Perhaps if she has a thought about what you've shared about particular keywords, how they resonate. If there's something you might like to say, Juliet. And if not, that's okay too. Thanks. She says it's helpful, Jürgen.
I'm glad to hear that.
Okay.
And I'm just toggling back over to our main screen that is going to look kind of small right now. So Juliet, here is your here, hang on. Got it. Here is a sheet that I am trying to add some content into for you. These key phrases and keywords that we were just researching, and I'm going to go in. Hang on a sec. Going to go back into. It's a little wonky to try to get these key phrases from a spreadsheet into Google Docs. I can copy the key phrases, but really what I want to do is actually...
Well, while you're doing that, I can let you know that Juliet said that she's excited because she has a great podcast coming out about women social entrepreneurs ecosystem.
Oh, that's a good...
So
that's a good opportunity, isn't
it? I hope you can stay, Juliet, because when we get to how you might SEO your specific episodes, then this will continue the story for you, how you can do that.
All right. And so I have managed to paste this into the spreadsheet. Like I said, Juliet, I will just send you a link to this after. And, here are some of the key phrases and the search volume and all the data that, the keyword difficulty, all the data is on the sheet. And you can then use, these key phrases to optimize your post with. Business ideas for women, that was another really good one. There were a lot here. Let me just... So now, one of the things that's important when you're using these, you have to use this phrase exactly. Women social entrepreneurs, like if you were doing that and optimizing for it, you would want to create or craft a title around that. And maybe we can crowdsource this. So let's try and create a podcast episode title from the phrase that includes the phrase women total entrepreneurs. And the folks that would have seen us present at Podfest, that I like using CoSchedule's free headline analyzer. And it basically gives us a little bit of a score on how well does this title, how well would this work for a podcast title. And right now the score is kind of low for women social entrepreneurs. And that's a couple of words around the CoSchedule headline analyzer. The value of using a tool like this is more that you try multiple times to improve your podcast title. It's not so... Robin, you use it a lot, don't you? I mean, what's your finding in terms of using a tool like that to try to get a good headline?
Well, I think in the early days, Jürgen, it was very helpful. But with anything, once you gain the experience, you have a sense about what's going to work and what's not. And unless you have an account with CoSchedule, very often you have to keep signing up. So
right, yeah,
that's personal choice.
And just to clarify, Jeff just asked something in the in the chat space that I want to highlight. Are you advocating that the key phrases are used in the show notes or that a separate blog post is created? No, I'm advocating that the key phrases are actually used straight in the show notes. We're turning the show notes into a blog post. Really, the show notes are a blog post. And I know that there's some difficulty for folks that might be using, might not be producing show notes or that are using Libsyn. We had a couple of submissions of people that don't have their own website, but that are using the Libsyn website for it. And it gives you sort of some limited abilities to use some of the rich tool sets that are available out there. But for sure, the way that, we see this work for podcasts that do it effectively, like Deeper Dating, for example, is, the transcript gets pasted in and optimized along maybe with a table of content and a summary at the top. And then, you have an authority looking article with lots of additional images and quotes and made to look really professional that gets optimized for this key phrase. And then when somebody stumbles across it, typically what they would see, is something like this. So just to answer the question more fully, let me go into, let me just pull up an episode on Deeper Dating. Just hang with me for just a second. Okay, so here's an example of the Deeper Dating podcast. I'm going to just pull up his latest episode. And I guess the key phrase probably was false self. And you can see that what this looks like on his site is nothing like a transcript, right? It looks like a blog post I've written. But when you go here, you can listen on Libsyn. When someone shares it, importantly, this is another point that I want to get into in some of the other examples, he's using the permalink, which means that this isn't going to Libsyn, it's not going to Anchor. This creates a backlink for his own website, and that's super important, so that when you are, you're earning from incoming links from all places where this gets shared. So that's just one example of what this looks like in practice. So I hope that explains it a little bit, at least not our approaches. There are multiple ways of doing this, of course.
And Jürgen, you might like to respond to Ivo. He's claiming, he's stating correctly that there are two pieces of written content, one that goes into the podcast apps, and then the longer piece that you would put on your website.
And also the term show notes needs to die. I agree with that totally.
Also, Ivo, let us know what you're proposing here instead of this term show notes. It's almost an embarrassment when you have to explain to somebody show notes. So, that's great. So, and of course, with Polymash, our view is that, you really want to keep bringing people to your own website. So that's why we're advocating these long form show notes.
Yeah, and Ivo is saying
whatever
that
the word is other than show notes.
And so Ivo was also saying that there are really two pieces of content there are really two pieces of content that matter. The ones that are showing up in the podcast apps, which is your podcast description, and that should definitely have a link back to your episode because that creates backlinks. But then the full article, like a lot of people are putting like 50,000 links into the thing that they share on iTunes and everyone else. I advocate against that. I want only one single link to show up, and that should drive traffic to your blog post article, show notes article, whatever the new language is that Ivo is going to shortly come up with. Microcopy. Hang on. So here we go. It's microcopy. I like that.
Yeah, but that would be.
Oh, that's the microcopies for the description. Okay, so then maybe it's macro copy.
Yeah. And you need both, right? Well, we advocate you need both, right?
So it's the macro copy anyway. So yeah, good point. I just want to not leave Juliet hanging with putting our heads together on women social entrepreneurs. And the way these tools work, the way that this headline generator tool works, for example, if it was a listicle, right? Top 10 women social entrepreneurs, or 100 or 10 top women social entrepreneurs, or something like that. When you're turning it into a listicle, these tools, 10 top women social entrepreneurs, let me just do this again. And you guys type into the chat the ones that you want me to see. Now, you see it improved from 29 to 52, and it's giving me some insights around what it's thinking is happening with these headline scores. And if we can get it into the 60s or 70s, then that, typically becomes, it's a little short still. Top women entrepreneurs. Robbie, any thoughts online?
I'm not seeing this very clearly, but...
oh, yeah, let me make it a little larger.
Thank you. Yeah, because I'm looking at my iPhone.
10 top insights from women social entrepreneurs. Let me see whether that improves the headline or it goes down. 67, okay. That's getting a little bit better. It's saying that we should have an emotional, and this is, again, this is a silly algorithm. I'm not advocating that this algorithm solves anything per se. What I'm advocating is that you going through the practice of trying this out 4 or 5 times and of improving it, it serves as a catalyst. And, I guarantee you that the last one or the ones after 7 or 8 tries will be better than the ones after the first try, if that makes sense. So I'm not saying that this is a panacea that, that sort of solves or creates headlines for you. But this could be, for example, the headline score of 67 is usually good enough. You don't have to hunt around for anything more than that. And what we do in our process is, and actually I'm going to put that in, these power words or words that people can use, we're going to share these as well. These are sort of words that if you use some of them, they're more unusual and presumably click-worthy. I've used before, but I cannot get in the 80s. My high score was 79. 79 or 80. Anything in the 70s is great. I mean, I'd be perfectly happy with that. Job. Juliet is saying that, she's used it, she's used that tool before. But kudos to you that you are focusing on making click-worthy copy, because that's really when it shows up it's not just on your website, it's also when you're browsing through, through podcast episodes on the Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or anywhere else. How click-worthy is what you're telling the audience? Does it tell what the benefit of listening to this episode is going to be for the listener? If that gets clearly communicated, that's super important. And so just looking at the chat again.
Yeah, I just, if I can just jump in here, Juliet's asking, do you recommend to use it for your title episode as well as or just for the blog post? And it's both as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, and Juliet, just to be sure, what I'm advocating is that there's no two things, to where you have a episode and then a separate blog post for the episode. For me, the one thing where the entry that if I say, look, where do I listen to your latest episode? What I want you to send me is a link to your show notes page or macro. I don't know. Now Ivo's got me insecure now of using the term show notes. I'm using it just because most people know what I mean, right? But like that's where your podcast lives. That's what you share on social media. We're very big on trying to promote and have your website be the center of attention for your content. And so that means that if I'm sharing something, I don't want people to share, my iTunes link or my episode on Spotify or on Libsyn. What I want people to share is my episode as it appears on my website. And so for me, that article is, for your podcast is, your episode link. That's the permalink URL that companies like that Libsyn, actually supports. And that's, that's a really important concept. And maybe what I should do, what do you think, Robbie? Should I jump in and just explain this concept of permalinks for a minute? Because that came up in our presentation at PodFest, and that's a really important aspect of doing SEO and of earning backlinks from the show. So I'm hoping that, Juliet, you would find this useful as well. Robbie, any thoughts?
Yeah, and I'm wondering whether that might also address Audrey, who's Noise Media Network. She has a different issue here, and so I'm just wanting to be inclusive here, where she goes live 4 days a week. And so, perhaps, these long-form blog posts or show notes aren't really applicable in that case. So, it is horses for courses. And so that's what I just want to make sure that we do acknowledge everybody here, Jürgen, right?
Yes.
So in terms of the
I've had those
permalinks,
I've had those comments on the screen.
Yeah,
thank you for that.
And as far as permalinks, up to you if you feel that's going to be useful at this point.
I think that I think I might jump in there for a second. So guys, just give me a moment while I set that up, because that was part of something that's hugely important. Give me just a moment. Yep, here we go. I've got it.
Yeah, Rick's saying that would help.
So really what we're talking about is that whether you're hosting of your podcast, where you're hosting it, does that have anything to do with your SEO? Does that, does it influence it? And yes, it does. So does it make a difference whether you're hosting on Libsyn or SoundCloud? So this concept of episode permalink is an important concept. And what these permalinks are links in your podcast feed that are baked into your feed, and also on most podcast players. And I have a couple of examples here in a minute, but here you're seeing again an example of Deeper Dating Podcast. You can see that in his feed, it's not pointing to Anchor, it's not pointing to Libsyn, it's pointing to his website and a short code for his episode, in this case, episode 21, right? Because let me show a couple of examples. Here's on actually a pretty big podcast, and it's hosted on Anchor. And look what happens if I share this on social media. Well, where's the traffic going to go? Anchor. Does Anchor need more traffic? No. I would argue that, in this case, Serena's website should be what earns the traffic, but that's not happening. By contrast, compare Ken's website, right? So if I go and share on Ken's website and click on that, it's sharing the link on Twitter, on social media, and elsewhere to his podcast show notes, to his podcast website. And what that does is it earns backlinks over time from pretty high domain authority, right? So because Ken does it this way, or we do it like that for him, he's earning backlinks from Stitcher, from Spreaker, from all sorts of other places that, that the podcast goes live on. And, we haven't talked about show notes content syndication yet. That's what we do with StoryChief, where we take show notes and publish them to a bunch of different places in order to earn more backlinks. But this, at the very least, means that your podcast host and setting it up so that your links don't point to the Libsyn episode, that's an important concept. And Evo is actually commenting on this. Most of what we're talking about here is on site. And, and actually I wanted to jump into, how we sort of like the entire methodology that we follow. Some of it is offsite, right? The SEO keyword research is offsite. Then creating these click-worthy episode titles, that's also offsite. That's something that you can do now. People sort of think that, oh my God, this is so complicated, so much work. But you could do this like once every 3 months. You don't have to do this, you can do it for one season in advance. Anyway, but the episode titles, that off page, then these long form show notes via transcripts, finding and optimizing the on page stuff, which we have the time, we're going to get into that, optimizing, adding images, adding all tags, optimizing for readability. And then the offsite bit starts again once you distribute and syndicate your show notes to multiple places with the platform that I'm hoping to show you today, as well as sort of social media influencer campaigns and so forth, and analytics. So I think of this as SEO research, which is off-page. Then the on-page SEO is stuff that you do to manipulate your actual show notes or blog or article content. And then the off-page again is, where you do link building and where you're going after social signals and so forth. And if you're asking why does it have to be so complicated, it really doesn't. I mean, because the amount of AI-driven keywords that are available now versus in the past are amazing, and they make things way, way easier. And this is, what we're here to share with you is you already saw that it was relatively easy to find keywords to judge the ranking for a site. If you're on WordPress, you might be using Yoast plugins. If you're using a platform like StoryChief, which I'll demo in a minute, you don't even need that. But basically, at the end of that, your podcast episodes get distributed to a bunch of different places, and that's the key for using content syndication. I've just pulled that slide up really quick because you already syndicate your show note, your audio, right? You publish it to iTunes, and it then goes out to a bunch of different podcast apps and players. Why not do the same thing for your show notes? Because that means that you're going to earn backlinks coming back from Medium, from Blogger, from your other websites, from a partner website, from social media, and so forth. And it's those links that very quickly, those results I showed earlier, and with Ken Page's Deeper Dating podcast, earning a bunch of ranking very highly quickly. It comes from this idea of content syndication, and the platform that we're using for this, which is StoryChief. And that's what I have an affiliate link for. It makes that dead easy. So I might not go into all the detail here, but I'm hoping that was a little bit helpful in terms of identifying how this sort of hangs together, and why the reasons that using permalinks, or what the concept of permalinks is, and how it figures. Where are we? Any questions in the chat? Oh, the Libsyn smart links. No, maybe Jeff, you can expand a little bit on that, on what you mean from the Libsyn smart links. But when we publish to Libsyn, we use custom permalinks that basically point to the website of where these posts are published. Okay, if I go back to Juliet's examples now. So I'm hoping that, Juliet, you can use one of these. You already said that you're familiar with the KW Finder tool. So we'll just leave it at that, because if you know how to use that, hopefully this little bit of keyword research here for you will be helpful overall. So with that, Robbie, maybe we can move on to another example of someone who's sent us something, a submission.
I just don't know whether you'd like to respond to Audrey, though, that's Noise Media Network, who has a news show, and she goes live every 4 days. Specifically, maybe, Audrey, you might like to put a question to us. What are you seeking to achieve here?
So while we do that, why don't I sort of take our next submission so that we can help a few more people, because I know we have kind of a lot of pending requests as well.
And one came in fact, while we were on air. So what would you like to demonstrate now, Jürgen? What would it be? You want to go to?
So I think I'm going to go do another submission. In this case, we got something from Liston Witherell, a modern sales podcast, and Serve Don't Sell is the podcast that he has, and he's doing a lot of things really well already. And for example, he has these episodes on remote selling, and I went in. I don't think, I'm not sure whether he is on the chat right now or not, but Robbie, maybe you can look out for that. He hasn't said hello yet. I don't think he said hello, so he might not be. But a couple of things that I wanted to point out from his submission, of things that he's doing really well. So he also was asking for episode content. So remote selling, when I'm looking at that, he's already ranking on page 1 for that, which is pretty cool, right? Let me jump into search, look for remote selling. And he just has an episode, that's, here he is, servedon'tsell.com. Now, look, again, an opportunity of where, when we're looking at the KW Finder results, there are 330 people searching for that, and the keyword difficulty is 13. So I think that he's come up with a really good concept here to somehow incorporate the term remote selling And and he does rank for that. But look, when I look at what does he rank for it with, when I actually open up the page that he has, it opens up something that is not a podcast episode, but again, you see he's got a long article, almost like what I refer to as cornerstone content, sort of like 2,000 words or more with a lot of images and headings and so forth. And that's what he's ranking for. So what he can do to support that being on page one is to come up with variations on remote selling and to make his website even more relevant for that. And one of the thoughts that I had when I looked at this was for example, sales conversations. He was asking about that. Hang on. He was asking for, hey, can you help me with
video selling,
sales proposals,
sales conversations,
right? So like if I go in and we look at sales conversations, so what I'm saying is that don't use the same keyword over and over again. That will hurt you and dilute your SEO authority. So when you already are optimizing one episode or one article for a keyword, leave it at that. You can use variations. You can use slightly different ones and additional ones, but make sure that you don't hurt yourself or cannibalize your own listing, if that makes sense. And so from that perspective, that's why I thought that for remote selling, he might not want to have that be the keyword that he now uses, because he's already ranking on page one. But sales conversations, look at this. This is a key phrase that has 540 searches and is got the keyword difficulty ranking of 26, so it's still considered easy. And if I look at the people who are ranking in place one, well, it's competitive, but let's take a look at what his website's domain authority is, because, as I mentioned earlier, that is always a factor. So Serve Don't Sell is domain authority 15 again, with a 1.2 million Alexa rank. So, he's already ranking on page one, so he's doing some really, really great stuff. But if I look at sales conversations now, that would be a good key phrase to use. So again, let's jump over to the key phrase, the keyword, the co-schedule headline analyzer, and type in sales conversation. Well, as you might imagine, that is so short, that's not good enough for an episode title. However, and let me just close that. But what if we use some alternatives here? Making sales conversations more effective, for example. Let's try that. Okay, 48. Not everything. How about how to make sales conversation more effective? 80. Yikes. Okay, I'm stopping there. So I'm going to copy that. That's that would be a really good title for a episode that he could use, and I'm just going to put that in for him.
How-tos and
how-tos and the listicles
very popular, because people are searching how to and what is.
So I'm moving on because I haven't seen Liston ask any questions. He might be in the UK or somewhere else. So we've.
Jürgen, I wondered if you would, maybe you've said this and I was drifting off somewhere, talking about the value of these key phrases, when it comes to, if you were to buy these key phrases.
Yes.
And how, you are actually earning great visibility without spending $1.
Yes. I mean, that I can jump into, like, for example, Actually, it's listed. It's something that you can see on the cost per click screen, or in KW Finder. The value of the key phrase is indicated by the cost per click column. So that is the average cost per click value in Google Ads, and this is what you would be paying Google if you wanted to, because if you can't rank if you just started a brand new site, and you're pretty sure that you're not going to organically, or you're just in a hurry, you can't wait the 3 weeks, because this takes time, right? This is a long-term strategy. As I mentioned, a year later, I stopped. I mean, my podcast is still driving traffic. It's evergreen, but it takes longer to ramp up. But so where this, what matters in this case, or the thing that illustrates that in this case is that the value of it is this cost per click value. Sales training courses, for example, you can see that is a much more competitive term. The difficulty is is higher, but it's also got a higher cost per click. Is that what you meant, Robbie? Does that answer your?
Yeah, thank you. Yep. Yep.
And so you can, and the analyzer that we had a little bit earlier, and maybe we'll pull that up on the next example in SpyFu that I use from time to time. That analyzer, would actually tell us. So let's look at serve, don't sell. And, just for listing here, I'm just going to go in and look what the value of the keywords that he's already ranking for is. So let's look that up real quick. So list and site serve, don't sell ranks organically for 33 keywords, and they're worth $64 a month. That's good. Like I said, $64 a month, I'll take it, right? Okay, so with that, maybe let's move on to another example. Scott's still here, so why don't we have a quick look at Scott and the Not Real Art podcast. I tried to give him a shout out a little bit earlier, but let's look at the Not Real Art site, because I think Scott's in an interesting position. And what I mean by that is that he interviews celebrities, artists, and all these amazing folks. Here's the top 100 top street artists. They get defensive if you say top 100, it's not ranked, but that's an awesome resource. But basically, if we look at the rank for the site, it's still a relatively new site. The domain authority is 13, but it's going to go up, and it's going to keep going up. And so what Scott was asking us is that, like, hey, what about if I interview somebody? For example, he's about to launch an interview of somebody named Dan Ubik, a podcast producer, but he's also interviewed some pretty celebrity type people. And so there's a kind of a benefit, right? Like if somebody looks for a celebrity and what comes up is your interview with them, hey, that's great, right? I mean, I'd go for that any day. So let me look at Dan Ubik. Dan music producer. Okay, so now here's the rub. There's no one searching for that term, or at least not regularly. So, all right, what if I drop the term music producer? Okay, what if I just look for Dan Ubik? Okay, well, Dan Ube Productions. Let me just look at his site. So when I'm searching for his guest now, what comes up in first place, of course, is Dan's own website, and so that only makes sense. And even though he only has domain authority 7, well, it's because he owns that name. So I'm not sure that if I look at music production, that's going to be ultra competitive. I'm assuming. We'll do a search and see whether there's any opportunities to weave in the phrase, music production, but yeah, like look at this, 48,000 people looking for that term. The keyword difficulty is 41, so this one would be hard, to go for. So where I'm going with this is that sometimes it's good enough, even though there may not be that many people looking for the person's name, using the person who you're interviewing, especially if they're a celebrity, or even if there was 100 people searching for that, if, the likelihood is that Scott will easily rank and come up for page one. And if Dan and other people search or share this interview, that's going to earn both rank and traffic for Not Real Art. So I'm hoping that's sort of helpful. Let's try the other, Lacey Flint, Archivist and Curator, Explorers Club. All right, so, there are a couple of terms in there that I could try. Let's just jump in, like obviously this is like, let's see what happens if I actually look for Lacey Flint. All right, so with Lacey, there are actually 300 searches for Lacey Flint. I'm not sure whether this is the same Lacey Flint. She has a book out. Maybe Scott, let us know whether this is a different Lacey Flint or not, because that can happen, right? Maybe I'll add curator or archivist to the... Okay, Lacey Flint, archivist. So you have to be careful that when you're doing SEO, often, what happens is like, we've tried to SEO optimize for a key phrase, but there's like a big movie out that has that name, for example, right? And then, you're kind of hosed because Warner Brothers or other really high powerful sites are in there, using up all the oxygen. So, and if it's obviously, if you are optimizing for the name of a guest, if that's not the guest, then, it might not work. Scott's saying, by the way, that Dan works with some of the coolest hip hop artists, and so they might look for him, or they might know who he is already, and that might be a good connection. So I'm suggesting that if you don't have an obvious key phrase for your podcast to using the name of your guest is sometimes a good idea, because you can sort of like hijack that. Okay, Evo's got a pro tip for us. Thank you, Evo. The guest name of the episode title. And the name of the guest was the most intriguing thing about your conversation. It's probably not all that intriguing of an episode. Yeah, so you can but you could combine the name of your guest with something intriguing, right? I mean, like insights you never thought of with, but make your I think maybe even what you're saying is, make your titles interesting. Don't just use the name of the guest. I'm just saying that from an SEO optimization point of view, if you're out of ideas, or you feel that, you can't rank, using the guest name to be able to try and rank for it is, sometimes an alternative. And Noise Media Production is, thank you so much. If you're going to try out this tool, just go to polymash.com/live, or you can go to polymash.com/me, or polymash.me/kwfinder. Either one of those would work, but it's on the bottom of the page at polymash.com/live. Thank you. So just to go back in the chat, Dan and Lacey are examples of experts who are not that well known. All right, so that's a challenge. So Scott, I think then you need to know more about the episode. Like once you have it recorded and you can sort of like think of what the themes were that you talked about, then you can start using some of the topic and content of your actual conversation to drive something, if it's insightful, or to see whether you can, if you're talking about some event in the art world, or a conference that's happening, or something else, so it's very, with the amount of information that I have right now, I wouldn't know how to properly optimize that. Once you have a transcript, or once you have the initial, once you have some more to go with, and I know that Scott is, is friend and client. I know Scott is also using KW Finder. So once you get a transcript back, or once you get your show notes back from whoever you're working with for those, you can more easily identify things that you want to optimize. And
yeah, and Jürgen, I think Rick is, he has the podcast, the Outdoor Biz podcast, and you can read his comment there that he has a lot of big brands in the outdoor space. And so maybe you'd like to, respond there.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that if you went by the brand name, it might actually make things more difficult. So let's have a look at Rick's real quick. Scott, just keep asking questions, and I know that we're going to deep dive with your offline anyway, right? But so the Outdoor Biz podcast is the podcast that that Rick has sent us, and in that podcast, hang on a second, I'm just going to pull up your podcast details and put your episode, your value proposition on the screen here, because it's great. So it's a weekly show where you hear genuine conversations with outdoor industry insiders. So iconic founders like JanSport, Eagle Creek, Fish Pond, Reddington, industry recruiters, sales, marketing executives, and many more. And they talk about their careers and inspiring outdoor adventure stories, and offer advice and direction on the path that you get. Okay, hosted by author, speaker, entrepreneur. That's fantastic. So let's have a look at Rick's website. I'm going to open that real quick. Just a sec. And let's have a look at the domain authority. That's always sort of the first go-to move, is to figure out, give me just a moment, why my computer is a little slow. 25. So that's getting into the territory where with some good and optimized content, you'll be able to get things under page one. I've definitely had things under page one. Also, I'm seeing that Rick has a good Facebook presence and Twitter follower. He has some Twitter followers, Instagram. Alexa rank 4 million. That surprises me, Rick. I think that that getting an Alexa rank is also sort of a parallel indicator. And you kind of want to be, Alexa rank is the opposite of, the lower it is, the better. It's sort of like you're the 4 millionth most popular site on the internet right now. And so the 4 millionth most is, there's 10 billion or 20 billion sites out there. So I think, I think that's fine. But I'm surprised, because typically if you are doing everything well with SEO and you're publishing regular content, you automatically sort of get into the million or below a million. And, if you're active on the site, a lot low. So, that's something, we could take that offline, Rick, as to what might be happening there. But, the good news is you have some, you have some great content. So let's have a look at some of your most recent episodes. So I'm going to open up an episode and the show notes for it. So great. You have episode specific show notes, which is always, that's valuable. Because I see some people, they don't do this, right? They don't have the episode specific show notes. They just have the link to Libsyn or elsewhere where you go in order to find the show. So, these look like good show notes. They're not very long. And maybe I can say a few words about content length here. And what I mean by content length is that, Rick, Google sort of seems to have a few inflection points at sort of 300 words. You want to have at least 300 words. Let me pull up my little, URL analysis for this. I'm going to look at this tool a little bit more detail. And Rick, if you were actually going in, you would now see the site profiler that would show you for this particular episode how many links or what the story is in terms of, hang on. Actually, I went to the wrong screen there, Rick, forgive me. What I wanted to do is actually look at the on-page SEO for this and zoom into that a little bit. So the headline structure looks okay. You've got some on-page keywords. You have some outbound links. So there's a lot of good stuff that happens here. But I think that the content could be longer, right? So this is where using a transcript can sometimes do wonders, because a transcript is automatically, for a half an hour podcast, a transcript is automatically going to put you into sort of elevated territory. Let me look I had a slide for this of where the cutoff points are that happen automatically with Google, of where you're going to start ranking for content. Let me just give me a moment to see whether I can find that, or whether it's too difficult to. It's too difficult.
I'll just speak like 300, 2,000.
300, 2,000, 5,000.
And 5,000.
Yeah. So Rick, anything that's under 300 words isn't going to rank, or is very unlikely to rank on page 1 or even 2 of Google. And he uses Temi for transcripts. I'll say take a little bit of that, and he's taken a fair bit of time on the show notes as well. So consider cleaning up Temi and actually pasting the transcript, into your show notes, but don't just leave it at that. Do what I was showing on Deeper Dating, where the transcript is disguised, and we use this tool StoryChief for that, and I'll demonstrate that in a minute. Maybe this would be I wished I had one of your transcripts handy, and we could use it. Now Temi, while this is loading, hang on. So Rick, this is a transcript pasted in, right? So it's basically, I'm just going to give Ivo a shout out here. It's basically the description. This is what shows up in all the, if you were to go to look up this episode in Stitcher, let's look it up. So this is episode 3. Just see what this looks like. 3 steps for resolving Stitcher. I want to just demonstrate something. I don't know whether this will show up or not. I'm just going to go into a different one here on Stitcher, and I can search for it. Deeper Dating. What I want to, really, it's any episode. What I want to show that when you see what's on Stitcher, it's just that little description and then a link to the episode. So we don't feature, like long and complicated show notes when the episode gets shared out. But when we're going to, let me go back to yours. So basically it would be, a small introduction up on top. But then what Ken does is, he pastes the content of the transcript underneath it, and we help him, create headings, add images, add captions, add SEO tag and other sorts of features. And we use this content syndication platform called StoryChief for that. And again, I think it's about time that we get to that, because we're going on an hour and a half here.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that Rick give us a thumbs up there. This is great. I see that Rick's still with us. So maybe this would be a good time to sort of like jump in. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to just take your copy here that you have in the show notes right now, and I'm going to pretend that there's a transcript, okay? But assuming that you have that lying around somewhere, right? And you have all your show notes here. I'm just going to copy this blog post, and I'm going to introduce us to the next major tool that we are so chuffed about, and that is a central part of our content syndication strategy called StoryChief. So I'm gonna jump over to StoryChief and sign in. And this is a Belgian company that we teamed up with. When I first started with StoryChief, they didn't even support podcasts, and I was in conversations with them, and they now supported a ton of meaning podcasting. They now support a ton of podcast platforms, Libsyn and elsewhere. So here we are. Don't worry about this stuff. I'm just going to click on the green button that says, okay, let me write a story. Okay, Rick. And here we are. And this looks much like Medium. It's a super simple interface, but your mind is going to be blown in a minute. So I'm going to just paste in what we just copied from your website, and it just pastes it in sort of like in a normal way. And it allows you to, so you can see how the headings are very simple to create. And so mind-blowing number one, introduction to the outdoors. It's got a built-in image search engine. I am now going to look up some outdoors images. That one, no, I don't want to use that one. I'm actually going to illustrate something else. So here's a beautiful outdoor image, but look how vertical it is. I don't want that in my show notes. But I can go and edit it right inside StoryChief. Use a crop tool. And, what I like is I just want to have sort of like something like this. I'm going to apply the crop, save it, and it pastes it, right into StoryChief. And so now, I don't know, let me look at what was the title of this episode. Hang on.
The Steve Gallo one? Learn more about
Steve
UFOS.
Gallo, learn more about UFOS and their awesome recovery footwear. Maybe there's a charm there for... Rick, I think that you're leading with Steve Gallo's name, because that's another aspect of SEO is Google places more importance to the beginning of the title. So by you starting with the term 206, I would consider moving that to the tail end. Also in Apple Podcasts, there's such limited real estate that, when you're seeing, I'm sure this would be cut off if I looked it up in Apple Podcasts. And, you're basically using some of that crucial real estate both visually as well as SEO-wise with the number 206. So a lot of times what we do is we just add the episode number to the end of the, of the title. But you're leading with Steve Gallo. Let's look up Steve Gallo before I continue here with StoryChief as we do this optimization. Scott signing up. Thank you, Scott. I appreciate you being on, buddy. We'll talk soon. And we're getting back to that. Okay, so there are 280 searches for the term Steve Gallo. So that's not, you might be getting some of that. Let me make sure that it's the right Steve Gallo that's showing up for this. Customer package good? No, I'm not sure. Colorado, California, gourmet foods. I don't think that's the one. So that's what I mean. If you optimize for Steve Gallo, that might not be the right one. So let's look at another recovery footwear. I think that's what I would focus on for something like that, what you guys are talking about here, right? So if I looked at let's look for a recovery footwear and see whether anybody looks for that. Yep, 170 people, and UFOS comes up. So UFOS already ranks for that. And, well, they should, because they own the thing. But recovery footwear is good. What's some recovery sandals? So I'm not sure whether this is making sense to you, Rick, but I'm, and that was the wrong guy. Rick is confirming that. Yeah, sorry, wrong guy. We dropped him. Anyway, so we're looking at UFOS flip-flops. That's 5,000 people. 5,000 people look for that. Oh, but that one's a little harder. But recovery sandals, I don't know whether this came up, Rick, so forgive me if I'm going on a tangent that might not make sense to you. But recovery footwear, let's just stick with that because that's the title of, your existing episode. And so if you too could jump into, look, here's somebody with, with only a domain authority of 16, you would beat that. So you could be on page 1 for recovery footwear, an interview with UFO's CEO. Let's look again at your Steve Gallo, UFO's, recovery footwear, awesome recovery footwear. So, there are definitely ways in which we could use the term recovery footwear. So in StoryChief, let me just show you, this is the next mind-blowing feature. I don't want to get too far away from, what we were talking about. But so recovery footwear, I'm going to just pretend, recovery footwear interview with UFO's CEO, what was his name?
Steve Gallo.
Steve Gallo. Gallo, and then I would put in like, EP. What was the episode number? 206. 206, something like that, right? So now you be prepared to have your mind blown, because StoryChief has a built-in SEO optimization coach. Okay, and so what's going to happen now is that as we create show notes, and especially if we were to put in longer form content here, it's going to coach us. We just have to follow the instructions that they give us, and we have to provide it a key phrase. So in this case, recovery footwear. I'm going to just put in recovery footwear. Okay, so we are now getting an SEO score of 65. And let me move my little mug to the other side of the screen here. Sorry, because we're like picture in picture. Great, Rick says it does make sense. I don't know what exactly. I'm assuming that maybe hopefully the title or whatever, or like something's making sense. I'm proud of that. So let's have a look at what StoryChief now is telling us, and what they are complaining about over here, or what their suggestions are. Let me put it this way: the key phrase in the title. Not all words from your crease for recovery footwear appear in the title. I thought it did. Did I misspell it? And Robin's going to come have a look as well. Recovery footwear appear in the SEO. Oh, the SEO title. So basically what StoryChief is going to do is it's going to give me a set of suggestions, and you kind of sort of just click on the thing that you want to see. So I'm going to put in David Ufo, Steve Gallo. So this might be just the SEO title. Footwear. I misspelled footwear. That's what the problem is. It's recovery foot. Oh, did I actually look it up right on the footwear and versus wear, like as in a warehouse? Which is it? Rick, can you let me know which one which one it is? Actually, Ufus uses wear as in wearing stuff on your feet. WEA. Yep. Footwear, and that's.
As in something you wear.
Yeah, and so I think I just put in the wrong title. Mm-hmm. And that's why it wasn't showing up. And recovery footwear, okay, and in the SEO title. Okay, so now it jumped up. Our score went up to 72. I'm going to go back in. The next thing that it suggests is key phrases and subheadings. So the key phrase recovery footwear should appear in some of the subheadings. So we could, for example, say recovery footwear. I'm going to keep spelling it wrong now. Episode show notes, right? I mean, this is crude. But you see what I mean. And look, we are now at SEO score 79. And let me zoom in a little bit. Can you guys see this? Okay, let me know whether this is working. And Jeff says, he's got to jump off. Sorry that we didn't catch you this time. I hope that we can help you in the future. But let me just push right on, because this part is amazing. Image alt attributes. So whenever you're using images, there's a part of the image that people that are reading challenged, or that have bad eyesight can have their browser read out content to them, and that's called an alt tag. That's what the browser would actually read up to you, and that is a chance for you to put um, to put a key phrase or your keyword into the description of these images. So once I do that, hopefully the StoryChief suggestion here will be even better. 83 now. The meta description link. Meta descriptions are the little things that show up in the preview snippet for of how this is going to show up on the internet. So when I actually look at it here, I see that there is no meta description. And the meta description is like if I start typing stuff in, it'll show you the preview of what this will look like in the search engine. Typically, what all we do is sort of start with a sentence from the introduction. So I'm going to paste that in. And you want to make sure that the meta description, again, features your key phrase: recovery footwear, global leader in recovery footwear as president. So now our meta description is good. It's still not long enough, but you get the idea, right? I mean, you get the idea of how this tool helps you to write show notes. And if you were to now paste your transcript to the bottom and went through that same process of adding headings, of improving the readability, which, by the way, right now it's really great. The readability makes a big difference, we found on SEO. So improving the readability and working through those suggestions here, especially for long articles, is definitely something to pay attention to. And if I pasted stuff in now from a transcript, that was really, really long, the readability would, readability would suffer, because a transcript is just one long paragraph of text. So breaking everything up into smaller sections, into smaller subheadings, is what makes all the difference. And so with this tool set, I'm hoping this is he's saying this would be huge for me. So StoryChief is actually free to sign up. Rick, I've got a promo code for 10% off. Ping me on that. Actually it's Polymash. So you can just sign up, use our affiliate link in polymash.com/live on the bottom if you want to try it out. It's free, but the plan started like $12 a month. It's super worth it. And if you want a discount when you are ready to sign up, you don't have to even use that right now. You can use my discount coupon code to get a 10% break. Anyway, so this is the part of the on-page SEO thing that Ivo was talking about earlier as well. And this is how that, by the way, question now is, well, how do I actually add my episode in here? This is the really cool part. You can embed tweets and rich media and all sorts of things into this. And I'm going to go, and I don't have your link for this, Rick. So I'm going to just take a different link from one of our podcasts. Robbie, I'm going to sign into our own podcast. I'm trying to, just to get a Libsyn episode link. I'll show you where to find this as an example in Libsyn. So okay, just going to use an old one. I'm actually on Whooshka now. But when you're in Libsyn, they actually give you a oops, 1 second. Go back. When you're in Libsyn, that's why I'm getting no stats. It's because my show is not on Libsyn at the moment. Where do I find after the fact? Here we go, the link. Yep, this is what I was looking for. In Libsyn, you get an open embed URL. Whooshka has something different. Like everyone has slightly different ways of embedding, but take a look at what happens now. When I take this URL and I go over to StoryChief and I paste it in, it'll just put my podcast episode right there. And note also that if I was to share it now, this harkens back to the, I got to go to the preview in order for us to see that. Got to go to a preview. If I was to share that episode, it's using my permalink URL. The permalink URL comes from, just to square the circle here, in the details, as I mentioned, Libsyn lets you define the permalink URL. So you select a custom URL, not the master media and not your show's blog page. You want the traffic to go to your website so that your website earns the rank and earns the incoming link. So hopefully that makes sense. I noticed that, Steve, you're using Libsyn as well, but you've got a player widget here that doesn't have the sharing component. You can configure that, but I would suggest that if you were using this for your own podcast, that you would do that, right? And so you can also include, for example, tweets, right? If there was like an UFOS tweet, like if let's look up UFOS on Twitter. Hope I spelled that right. Yep, here they are. And so let's say that you wanted to give the CEO a shout out. Let me just see. Yikes. Okay, here's one, the Jimmy Fund. Okay, hosting something. If I was to embed that tweet, you saw that it gives me this little link here. Now watch what happens in StoryChief if I was to embed that. Boom, instant attract. And by the way, now this is the major secondary component here is that if you were to publish this out to Medium, Blogger, and other places, these things will work. People will be able to listen to your podcast. The embeds, as you distribute and send this out to other places and syndicate your show, the embeds and all the permalinks, and the things that you're leaving in the show, they will be part of that. It'll honor that. So that is the last part that I want to cover in the content today, is actually the ability to then, in StoryChief, select and set up a bunch of different channels. And as you see here, if I was to go live with this, and I'm doing this on my site, but look at how many, I could publish this to Blogger, I can publish this to Medium, I can publish this to our ambassador lists, which is I'm not going to get into right now. I can publish this to multiple websites, to social media places, and everywhere else. And when you're getting ready to publish it, you can set it up to where it's going to go live on like 10, 20 different locations, and you can trickle it out. So the way that when we go live is we go live on our site, 3 weeks later on Medium, I want to sort of trickle it out so that these links look natural and they come in over a period of time, and that builds a good amount of rank for the podcast as you start using it. So I'm hoping that this was useful. Robbie, I've got you back on.
Yeah, again, Audrey's asking a great question. That's Noise Media Network. And maybe you can talk a little bit more about the syndication, Jürgen. So Audrey's question is, does the work you just did in StoryChief stay on StoryChief? And the reason she's asking is because you're embedding media.
No, absolutely not. That's a great question. So what you publish on StoryChief, it connects to your WordPress blog or Joomla or to a ton of other different destinations. And when you're publishing to those destinations, you tell it where you want it to go as a primary destination. That's set up in the audience. So my primary is always polymash.com, and it's going to make it's going to publish it there. If StoryChief ever goes bankrupt, I don't lose out because my site is live, and the content actually was published on my website. So I'm hoping that that sort of answers that question. But the content that we
can you go to the audience page?
Prepare. Yeah, I've got the.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
I've got the chat open.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a great question and not only that, but it's something else that if anybody's familiar with SEO, people worry about duplicate content penalties, they used to be called. There is no such thing really. It's just that if your content is in a bunch of different places, it won't rank, except that if you tag it properly when you publish it, and StoryChief has that built in, it does that for you automatically. And that's called a canonical tag. And the canonical tag tells Google where you want the credit to go. So the fact that I'm preparing the content in StoryChief by no means means that any traffic is going to go to StoryChief, which, by the way, they give you a free blog. So if you don't even have a site for your podcast, this personal website, this William blog, it's kind of a funny name, right? Like William. So like if I was to just click on that, if we were to go live now with, which is not my episode with the UFU's Steve Gallo CEO, right? Episode all mixed up. But, I think, Rick, you guys, you get what I'm talking about. But for the folks at Noise Media Network, when you do now publish, out, the credit is going to go to your primary website. You're going to also publish to a secondary site or an affiliate site, or the more you can come up with, the more backlinks will eventually link back to your blog. So the more the merrier, and that's why going on Medium, which has an 8 million strong audience already, publishing it to other places. That's the syndication angle. Just what you're doing with audio here, you're doing it with your show notes, and this platform makes it dead easy for you to define all the places that you want to go. So I'm exiting out of this now. I'm going to just screen share one last thing, which is I want to just show you guys on screen all of the different, in their parlance, it's called channels. And here are all the channels that you can publish to. So you can see that, let me make this a little larger. But, we can publish to WordPress, Drupal, custom websites, HubSpot, Magento, Sitecore, Shopify, right? Like this is awesome if you've got a Shopify store and you want to create some articles or some content that goes live in your Shopify store and drive some SEO to talking about your products, right? That would be one way to, that what we want to do. And I just have to interrupt for a moment, because somebody did what I hoped they would do. Ivo, you're still on with us. Thank you. The fish skeleton art behind you. Thank you, Ivo. That is a piece of artwork that we picked up. Robbie, where did we get that from?
We got that in New Jersey like 20 years ago, and it's all recycled stuff. So, it's very special to us.
I'm going to zoom in, not to my mug, but onto the... Yep. So it's made out of radiators and old car parts and rebar, and the lips are my favorite part. I'm not sure whether you can see the lips. I'm trying to show you all the lips, not my lips. Sorry if my lips are getting in the way. But the fish lips are made. Those are. You know what that is? That is an ice grabber, an ice block grabber. Back from in the day when ice blocks and ice was only available in warehouses. We're quickly going back to those times, but when people actually, you didn't have ice in your refrigerator or whatever, like the guys would drag a block of ice around the warehouse, and they had these tongs, and the tongs had that thing. So Ivo, hope that answers your question. Thank you for asking.
Where Ivo's attention is going to.
Yeah, so I think this is a good sign that this is going on quite long enough.
But we do have another question from Audrey, and she's very complimentary about how clear you're coming through, Jürgen. And she was inquiring about your camera and software that you're using for this live streaming. Is that another day, or how do you want to respond to that?
I thank you. I'm using a Logitech, cheap C920 webcam. So nothing special, and so I'm really relieved to hear that, because I'm obsessing around that. That's not good enough. But that's also Robin. So we're just using a couple of C920s. We're using a software called Ecamm Live. We've been fortunate enough this week, and Robbie, I've got us on split screen now. Mm-hmm. We've been fortunate enough this week to participate in the Ecamm Live Academy, which a guy named Adrian Salisbury is putting on. So if you guys are interested or curious about going live yourselves, it's been an awesome experience. And, we've learned a lot. I think Robin has had, maybe more time than I've had to participate. But yeah, like that's been an amazing coaching experience for us. And we're hoping to go live a little bit more and take some of this content and repurpose it. Anything else that you want to say about your experience in the Academy, Robbie?
It was really great, and it gave me a lot of confidence about showing up live. So I'm really looking forward to doing some live streaming as well going forward. But yeah, very, very thorough. Alan Sainsbury's a Brit, and he's very warm, very welcoming, very generous. And so that's
Rick, thank you so much. Just reach out and reach out to us anytime. I think that if you get going with some of these tools for your show, I think you've got some great opportunities with the domain authority that you're sitting at already. Noise Media Network too. Thanks for letting us know about the quality of the broadcast and everything. We really appreciate that, because we do want to work on that. This has definitely been
You're still looking at the fish. No, maybe you're back
looking
now.
at the fish. Yeah, there's the.
Again, I have this delay, so I'm sorry. It's very awkward. But I just put a note there, Jürgen, in the chat space, just reminding people that we'll be doing this SEO Saturdays every second Saturday, I think is our plan, this being the first one. And so if we didn't get to your content today and you want to revisit this, or just let us know, and we still have all your materials here, all your content here, and let us know, and we'll get to you next time.
Absolutely. I think thank you for mentioning that, Robbie, because there were quite a few submissions. I'm hoping that we caught most of the people that were live, at least to have some back and forth, and if they weren't live, well, we want to give priority. But what I would love to hear from folks in the chat or elsewhere is suggestions of deep diving, into other parts. What did you guys think of the StoryChief demonstration? Are there components or questions that you might have about that we could delve in a little bit more deep? It's a lot of material to cover in one live, but I'm happy to take future SEO Saturdays and do some research in general, but then focus on one topic to really deep dive into that. So what do you guys think about that? Robbie, any thoughts on what else we could ask folks to let us know in terms of feedback?
Oh, look, we had Sound of Crime. We didn't get to you. I'm so sorry. Sorry, I wasn't listening to you. I was focusing on the comments, paying attention to the people out there, not you. Sorry.
You were doing, and I see that I actually see a submission that we had gotten in from Sound of Crime.
Yeah, and, that's what I was just going to have a look and say, who is that? So I'm just going here.
Let me just move that. It did come in a little after some of the ones that we also had one from Political Trade, MedSurge Moments, and When Science Speaks. So I really appreciate you guys sending me that in. I'll reach out afterwards. I'm hoping that this live stream would still be useful, because some of the principles that we're talking about are the case with anyone. And Sound of Crime, we'll get, if you guys are on the live stream, we'll make sure that we catch you live next time. So I apologize for the folks that we didn't get around to.
Yeah. And again, Audrey did talk about, when she was looking at how you were optimizing some of the search terms and phrases, that it reminded her of Yoast. So
yes, actually, that's a really good point. Yeah. Thank you, because I think that Yoast and that was part. Check out the free mini course, because I talk about Yoast and I talk about alternatives that work on if you're not on WordPress. There are some SEO tools that are kind of like that do it outside of. I love StoryChief because it's so comprehensive and it's all in one package. But if you don't have a WordPress site, like let's say you're on Libsyn, we had a couple of people that submitted and their show just lives on Libsyn. So how do you do SEO optimization for that? Well, you can. There's a tool by Text Metrics that's linked to, that was part of my presentation at PodFest. We just couldn't get into all of that here. But that said, go to polymesh.com/live and sign up for the mini course, because it does talk about those alternative tools. And basically, StoryChief has baked into it a version of Yoast or something very similar. They may be slightly different. I love using Yoast, but what I love even more, and the reason that we don't use Yoast anymore, is that because we like operating in StoryChief as the central place to prepare our show notes and to prepare all content and to drip it out to all these different places. Yeah. So you're just working in that centrally in StoryChief, and it gets published to WordPress. And important thing, it integrates with Yoast. So any keyword you set, any meta tags you set, anything that you do in StoryChief is picked up by Yoast. When you go to your blog article on WordPress, Yoast will actually have all the work that you did in StoryChief will be present and for you to tweak in Yoast should you choose to do so. We don't do it because, by the time that a story publishes, if we need to make an edit or republish or go somewhere else with it, we make the edit in StoryChief and publish those changes out to everybody. Yeah. So
yeah.
Does that make sense?
Jürgen, how can people be in touch with you and maybe let us know what they might like to, if they want to do a little deeper dive, what might be some of the topics that they'd like a deeper dive into, all related again to how we grow our podcasts and get greater visibility.
Good point. Like we Robbie, right now, I think we don't have a contact form on the polymash.com/live page.
What about our Facebook page?
Yeah, join our Facebook group. Look for my own podcast is called the Podcast Growth Show. And if you just go and look for Polymash on Facebook or the Podcast Growth Show on Facebook, we have a podcast group. If you sign up for the mini course, you're going to get invitations automatically to the Facebook group. You can be in touch there. Just go to polymash.com and leave us a message there. And yep. So Noise Media says, I was at PodFest. How did I miss your session? It was a packed house, let me tell you. And actually, you kind of didn't miss it, because that mini live course is my session. It's the live stream that I did afterwards, and I broke it down made a mini video course out of it. So, wished I'd seen you there and chatted with you there. But glad to hear you were at PodFest. That's awesome. Okay, so with that, so Robbie, anything else? Shall we sort of start?
Winding down? Yes, my ears are hurting with these. I have to get some gentle ones, I think.
Yeah, like these long, you see these people with like fluffy.
But no, I'm just so grateful. It was lovely to have such an engaged audience here again, right? It was so good that you were active, and it wasn't like we're just talking into the biosphere.
I'm really grateful for the people who were here live, and for the people that that agreed to make their content available for us to look at.
A lot of trust.
We are of course not here to this is hopefully constructive idea generation. And not anything that I said hopefully was construed as criticism. It's just not.
Yeah.
And I'm really appreciative.
Yeah. And so great. So thank you for everyone being here, and just, be safe out there.
Yeah, stay safe, in these difficult times. For Robin and Jürgen at Polymash, we're signing out. And thanks again for being here. See you on SEO Saturdays, hopefully 2 weeks from now. Bye.